Welcome to the Friday weekly voice chat. Now it's on Saturday. We are the Men's Human Rights Discord. We are the semi-official server of the Men's Rights subreddit. Today's topic, as you can see in the title, feminists do not understand the men's rights movement. And I'm sorry if I sound a little bit heated, but I'm having this debate right now in my TikTok, debating a feminist. What does feminism actually do for men? And they're saying, oh, well, feminism breaks down patriarchy and feminism breaks down toxic masculinity. Why does a women's movement have the right to define what patriarchy is? Why does a women's movement have the right to define what toxic masculinity is? And why does a women's movement think that they should have the right to control how a men's movement should operate? There's a subreddit called Men's Lib, which claims that they are a feminist counterbalance, quote unquote, to the men's rights subreddit. And they say, well, we're a men's movement, but we're pro-feminist. That's not a men's movement. A men's movement should be pro-men. A men's movement should be by men, for men, of men. Not a feminist movement that talks about male issues in a way feminists approve of. And I've noticed a big hypocrisy of feminists is they say, well, something feminists does to help men is they help to break down toxic masculinity. And one of the elements of toxic masculinity is how men can express themselves. Being an MRA is me expressing myself. So when I express myself as a men's rights activist, all of a sudden I get shouted down and silenced. Wait a minute, feminists. I thought you said that you think men should be allowed to express themselves. No, what feminists mean is men should be allowed to express themselves in a way feminists approve of. A men's movement should be allowed to exist in a manner in which feminism approves of. And when feminists think that we are against them because we hate women, or when feminists think that we're anti-feminist because we want to preserve our privilege, no, we're against feminism because feminism is constantly attacking us for just existing. Feminism is constantly advocating for laws that hurt men. Right now in the UK, Parliament is debating a law on domestic violence and how domestic violence will be treated under law in the country. What do feminists want? They want a gendered law where male victims are treated as guilty by default, where men are treated as the perpetrators by default. They want to have they've achieved it, a two-tiered justice system where violent female criminals are treated leniently by default. 2013 in India, there was a debate about laws on sexual assault and rape, on how the laws were gendered and male victims were not included. The government was going to make the law gender neutral and make it gender equal. Feminists protested against the inclusion of male victims. Their only protest, the change of the law, was that now men would be included. The status of female victims wasn't going to change whatsoever. The only change that now male victims would be included. Feminists protested. In the UK 10 years ago, when they were debating equalizing the pension age, the state retirement age, feminists protested equal pension ages. Why? Because women had an earlier age. Women retired at 60, men at 65. So 60 for women and 65 for men was the age when a worker would become eligible for state pension. Feminists protested equality. Because when law or inequality, discrimination, or sexism is in favor of women, feminists have no issue with it. Where are the feminists protesting conscription? Where are the feminists? And actually, I will give some credit. I will give some credit to the National Organization for Women, aka NOW. They actually did join with the NCFM, the National Coalition for Men, in the lawsuit against Congress over selective service in the US. So I will give credit where credit is due. For the most part, feminism not only is completely useless when it comes to helping men's issues, but feminism is often a hurdle or an obstacle. Not only do feminists try and prevent MRAs from addressing male issues, feminist groups and organizations often make it worse. And if you're a feminist listening to this and you think, well, I don't think that way, maybe you don't. But you need to really look at what do these actual organizations, the feminist organizations that are political in nature, the ones who go to Congress, the ones who go to Parliament, the ones who actually lobby, actual political lobbyist groups. And what are some of the more famous academic feminists like Dr. Charlotte Proudman in the UK, like Clementine Ford from Australia, Look at what they actually say. Like Jen Bossio in Canada, who released an absolute nonsense pseudoscientific study saying how circumcision does no physical effect, no physical damage on men, no negative consequences, which was debunked by the British Medical Journal as pseudoscience. So when you look at how does feminism contribute to men's issues? All I see is harm, and all I see feminists say, they make these abstract claims like, "Oh, we dismantle patriarchy." Tell me what that means tangibly. You dismantle patriarchy. That doesn't mean anything. You're just making up words. You're just making up phrases. You're just making up concepts that mean nothing. I don't care about you dismantle patriarchy. I want homeless men to not be left to freeze. I want babies to stop having their genitals mutilated. I want violent female criminals to go to prison where they belong. Dismantling patriarchy is a nonsensical buzz phrase. It's a made up term and it's a made up concept. So I've made several videos in the last couple weeks challenging feminists to tell me, what do you do to men? To tell me, what do you actually do to help men? And I can never really get a solid answer. All I get is the same, "Oh, we dismantle patriarchy. Oh, we challenge toxic masculinity." Tell me in your own words what that means. Give me tangible results. Show me, what laws have you changed? Show me statistically, give me a study of something that you've made better for men. A real stat. Give me something tangible and solid and real, and they can never do it. And then when I start showing them examples of when feminist organizations fight against the rights of male rape victims in India, or fight against the rights of male victims of domestic violence in the UK or in the US under the Duluth model, there's all these excuses to, "Oh, but actually, here's why sexism against men is okay. Here's why it's fair." In a purely hypocritical way. And they will use arguments against the rights of men are direct inverses of how they defend the rights of women. So they'll say things like, "Oh, well, male victims of domestic violence don't need the same legal support because they're the minority," which is debatable in and of itself. But then they'll say, "Well, female students in STEM need extra scholarships because they're the minority." Wait a minute. When men are the minority, you're saying because there's less of them, we should pay less attention. But when women are the minority, feminists say, "Well, because there's less of them, we need to pay them more attention." It's purely hypocritical, and it is so consistent. And so feminists are wondering things like, why are so many people becoming anti-feminist? I'm thinking of a study, I think from last year or 2020. I don't remember how many people were interviewed, but they questioned British males between the ages of 16 and 24. 50% said they were anti-feminist. And of the other 50%, they were split. Only 1 in 5, only 20% were pro-feminist. The other 29 or 30% or so said they were uncertain. So feminists' reaction, of course, to that was to say, "Oh, we need to educate these men on feminism." No, maybe it's because they're educated on feminism that they're anti-feminist. Maybe you need to educate yourself on the men's rights movement and what we actually believe and why feminists are having such a backlash in the first place. Why are we reacting this way in the first place? Why are people coming to the men's rights movement in the first place? Because maybe to feminists, the problem is you. So that's my introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Blue. The UK Parliament, in case you didn't know, they had a consultation or something about domestic violence, and there was a British MP who stood up in the Parliament, and he said that we can't get any, we can't have equality on, domestic violence for men, even though domestic violence is like he quoted 30% for domestic violence as being male victims, but I mean we know from the stats that it's actually 50%. But I'll go with 30% as just like get some help. If we can just get that much across, that would be at least partly a win. And he said that they couldn't get anything done on it because basically feminist organizations, women generally, like activists, would just blow their tops at them and launch petition after petition and ring the phones off the hooks and stuff like that, and just like shoot it down as fast as possible because they don't want parity and they don't want anything like that. And then this woman stands up and she goes to speak and she says basically that we she pretty much lets slip that this is deliberate and that I mean I think she was trying to refute him but she couldn't, and she was just going back at him. But this is pretty much what we have to deal with, and that's all she really has to say. We can show them study after study that 50% of men are like 50% of abuse victims are men, but it just doesn't matter to these people because they're not honest. The ones who are making the actual rules are not honest at all. But we do need to remember that the ones who are on the ground, the ones who are, in the trenches, as so to say, a lot of those feminists are either like, I mean, they can be the manipulative kind of feminists, but they can also just be sheer ignorance personified. They can just be, walking around just repeating blindly what's the head feminists say. And that's really how feminism operates. You have a few people at the top who are manufacturing quote unquote facts, and the rest of them are just repeating them, regurgitating them. And the media is, you know, part of that first group that is aware and understands that this is all BS. But the readers and all of that, they're ones who are on the ground, and often the activists, even they are just like they are so overwhelmed with sympathy for women that they don't even know that they're being lied to and manipulated, and that they're being given this
Genuine
false
brainwash.
narrative.
Drowning
Yeah,
in
genuinely brainwashed. I mean, we've had
naive, yeah.
yeah, we've had schoolwork and things like that from kids who, they've sent in their schoolwork and it's just like full of this feminist nonsense. And they'll sell it as like maths or something like that, or English. Like you've got to write an essay about an abused woman, or you've got to add up the rape victims or whatever. It's really manipulative.
Well, let's call it what it is. Feminism is feminism. It's a special interest group that advocates for women and women only. It has always been so. And the original intellectual crime of feminism is declaring that basically the world is comprised of male power and female victimization, which at the time was just naive. But as is often the case with crimes, the cover-up way exceeds the original crime. And for 50 years or whatever, or 100 years, depending on how 150 since Seneca Falls, the cover-up has been brutal to try and protect feminism from accountability, protect feminism from exposure. It's basically half of gender reality, the male power, female victimization, half of gender reality being presented and demanded to be accepted as if it were gender reality in its entirety. So it's very corrupt, and now, more than anything, I think it seeks to prevent exposure.
Yeah, this is why they can't allow a single male victim to be given any kind of airtime. This
That's
is
right.
why they're actually pro circumcision, I think, as well. It's because if the male victims are exposed to the world and people realize that they're the majority in many cases, such as in circumcision,
Yeah. Right, that
uh,
feminism falls like a
yeah,
house of cards.
it
See,
does.
if they give
It,
an inch, it can destroy the whole card house.
And it's happening. I compare it to a glass castle. Make no mistake,
Yep.
the cracks are there and they're only getting deeper, and they know it too.
Yeah.
And they're getting more and more desperate.
Yeah.
And what a shame we didn't have a rational GOP president from 2016 to 2020. That was such a pivotal moment that we could have really pushed, but instead we got something else. But it's gonna happen regardless. They can't. It's just not sustainable. I saw a post on, I don't remember if it was the men's rights subreddit or the left wing male advocate subreddit. And by the way, the fact that the left wing male advocate subreddit and Discord server exists at all is a symptom of feminist failures. The fact that so many of them are former male feminists who they don't want to call themselves MRAs per se, or they don't want to be part of what they perceive as the alt right, but they still recognize the sickness within feminism is a sign of itself. But there was a post saying how they were starting to notice cracks in men's lib. Men's lib is a subreddit I was talking about in the beginning in the intro. That's a so-called men's subreddit, men's rights subreddit, controlled by feminism. And I think that I've noticed the same thing for a while, and I think that it can be nothing less than exhausting be a male feminist. The constant abuse and mistreatment that you have to accept on a daily basis. I can only imagine how psychologically damaging that is. And I can't help but notice that whenever I go to a video on YouTube, whether it's a so-called liberal or so-called conservative source, so whether it's Fox or whether it's CNN, as long as it's not a very specific channel, like for example, my channel is going to be mostly MRAs. Sam Cedar is going to be mostly leftists. But if it's something that's remotely in the middle or mainstream, like Fox or CNN or BBC or Daily Mail or Guardian or MSN, something like that, and I go through the comments, anytime there's an article about feminism or men's rights, the comments skew very heavily towards men's rights and towards criticism of feminism. And the sense is that is my opinion, that's how the average person, if you really sat them down and had an honest conversation that wasn't meant to be a debate, that wasn't meant to be a gotcha, and let's go through the issues line by line. Let's go through your experience day to day. Let's go through what you notice around you at work, at school, on the streets. I think the vast majority of regular people agree with us, even if they don't know it yet. They experience it and they feel it every day. And I can only imagine how bad it must be for male feminists. I think that male feminists are the biggest future of the men's rights movement. I think there's going to be such a backlash.
Well,
There's going to be such a
I
split.
wish I wish I could raise awareness of equalism to give people a third alternative, so that they don't really want to call themselves MRAs and they don't want to call themselves feminists anymore. I wish it were possible to get this equalism famous enough, awareness of it enough. I think all kinds of people would jump ship and go with an equalist kind of concept.
Well, Tim, I'm gonna when we do our video interview, our faces,
Yeah,
I hope that you make that a primary feature. Why don't you, because you do a lot of work on this, um, why don't you tell us a little bit, take the floor a little bit, and tell us about your equalist sites that you operate and some of the work you do for equalism? Because we've had this conversation before where you've explained your theory of equalism, and I think it sounds great. So why don't you kind of flesh that out a little bit, people?
okay, sure. It begins with calling it even. It basically the assumption within equalism is that woman and man are and have always been equal, not the same, but equal. That men and women are and have always been about equal in number, evenly matched, with about equal overall weaponry and efficacy. And the sexes have been equal partners, therefore, in the human system, playing an equal overall force of influence in the human system, and therefore about equally responsible for outcomes. So it's also based on the idea that men have always been more respected but less loved, and women have always been more loved but less respected. and that's been a balanced system. Sure hasn't been a perfect system, but it's been essentially balanced and co-created by woman and man in co-equal co-partnership. Because out of the deal, each sex got what it wanted most. For his particular brand of self-sacrifice, man got the lion's share of the respect. And for her particular brand of self-sacrifice, woman got the lion's share of the love. It was kind of like a contract, an unconscious contract. And each sex fulfilled its end and earned its rewards fair and square. There's really nothing to begrudge. There's no reason to look back on the gender system as having been unfair. The sexes created it together, and each sex enjoyed the benefits and suffered the liabilities. Equalism is not so much about creating equality as it is in recognizing the equality that already is. It's really about balancing out the gender belief system. And then where we go from there is up to us. So I'm not suggesting that we stay where we've been historically, but I'm just saying that look back on history and look at it fairly, look at it in a balanced way. And there are, yeah, so equalism envisions a new gender neutral gender politics in which every gender issue is viewed as a matter of a shared responsibility. And it elevates woman to equal partner, and it completely rejects the idea of woman as powerless pawn under patriarchy. Equalism views what I call a patra matra census, a male-female consensus, as having been the ruling force in the human world. And patriarchy is just the male half of that. The other half I'll call matricensus, the female consensus, the sisterhood. And there's all kinds of things I could go on and on about how woman, what female power is comprised of, how it works, what channels it works through to apply an ultimately equal overall force of influence. But it's a number of hurdles to jump, and not just not just in feminism, but also in the men's movement. The men's movement must give up the victim crown. It cannot present itself as being the primary victims. That's a loser strategy. That's a female strategy. It works for women because women elicit the empathy required to make it work. What men need to do is take leadership, lead wisely, promote, seek to call it even, seek to balance out the gender belief system. It needs to be very vocal and very upfront about its intentions to heal the divide, to repair the social fabric, to seek intersex unity, fairness, and forgiveness. This is how we bring the general public on board with us, and that's how we win. That's a lot to chew on, but I can go on and on about equalism. I've spent 30 years working it out, so that's a thumbnail sketch.
Why do you, and I know you kind of already explained this, but specifically, why do you think feminism today could not be described honestly or accurately as an equalist movement? And you can choose to answer that either in terms of literally what are the actions and words that they do that are against the notion of equalism,
Well,
or philosophically, why do they choose not to be?
I think it's pretty obvious. Back in 1848, Seneca Falls, everyone believed that men have the power and women are the victims. And you see, if that's what you believe, then everything feminism is and everything feminism does makes perfect sense. If men have the power and women are the victims, then what else can women be the victims of but men, the ones with the power? So from there, from men of the power, women are the victims, you go to man bad, the over-empowered oppressor, woman good, the innocent victim. This is what feminism was founded on, that assumption. So how could it possibly be a movement for equality when you see feminism exists as a corrective? Believing that men have the power, of course, you're going to want to take power away from men. Believing that women are the victims, of course, you're going to want to extra reward and extra protect and advantage woman good, the innocent victim. I mean, it just comes right out of the belief system. So the problem with feminism is it's based on a false gender paradigm, because men never had the power and women were never the victims. But in 1848, that was inconceivable. And men were equal partners in that whole deception. You know, men went around with this, this persona of I've got the world on a string, the world is my oyster, all the cliches, that men really presented as if they were the ones in charge. And woman stood up and screamed, I'm the victim of the universe, and man did not protest. Chivalrous men just sort of jumped on board and said, yes, we must protect the female. So men and women co-created this whole mess we're in. But it's all based on an imbalanced gender belief system that feminism was created to balance out. You see, the irony is they're trying to balance out a balanced system. Uh, See, the power women wield for being more loved is equal to the power men wield for being more respected. There was never this imbalance that woman and man fabricated in their minds.
So kind of what you're saying is like feminists are trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist. And it's not that inequalities or gender issues don't exist, but the entire basis of feminist theory is wrong. So it's
Yeah,
therefore impossible for them to really achieve equality because the formula that they're using to begin with is flawed. The
that's right.
equation's flawed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They think that by taking power from men and giving it to women, and extra protecting and advantaging women, this leads to equality in their minds. And that's because they're looking at gender reality as it plays out along the respect axis. They're blind to how gender reality plays out along the love axis. But along the love axis, women rule supreme, and men are the ones that uh, are disadvantaged, victimized. Uh, yeah, it's funny. Woman and man co-created this illusion, this fantasy of gender reality, and it's based on instinct and eros, which are much more powerful than fact and logic. And we've been pounding our head against this wall because the human gender belief system is based on instinct and eros. And you see, in a deep way, this men have the power, women are the victims is an erotic story. It resonates instinctually, but it's also like this erotic story. It's a story of hot, hunky heroes, empowered alpha males coming to the rescue of sweet, weak, demure, um, you know, um, beautiful, innocent damsels in distress. That's a story as old as the hills. You see, it's an immensely appealing story, uh, uh, and so it's been very difficult to counter argue with fact and logic.
Well, I think part of the reason why it's hard to counter argue with facts and logic is because you're trying to. One of the things that came along with this is this need to be right.
Yeah.
And I noticed that they also really like to frame arguments in their favor, which is which is this whole thing really. It's all about framing. You know, they frame themselves in a way that gets them the most empathy, but they frame the other person in a way that alienates them and makes them seem inhuman. A great example of that is when you look at, you know, one thing is like physical violence, for instance. If a man hits a woman, well then, they use all these terms and they say, he's assaulting her and blah blah blah. But if a woman hits a man, it's, oh, she's a girl, that's a lady, you don't hit her, blah blah blah, and they use all these terms to like resonate emotionally. But at the end of the day, it's not a woman, it's a criminal. She's assaulting someone, right? You could use the same terms, but they specifically frame the language in such a way that they can leverage the emotion that people have towards women in their favor. And I don't think people want to give that up because they realize the power it gives them. I don't think people genuinely misunderstand women's advantage in the love spectrum. I think they completely understand it and they're using it to get what they want.
Sure, each sex uses the powers it has in compensation for the powers it lacks. Yeah, it's just that we didn't know women had so much power. We had no idea. We bought into the story that women are powerless. So as women keep accumulating more and more male modes of power onto their female modes of power, they're becoming sort of all powerful, and and women are abusing that power. Women have a shadow side just as men do, and men abuse the powers they have, and women are abusing the powers they have. So, look, when woman stands up and says, I am the victim, pour all empathy, caring, concern, compassion, all reparations, all efforts upon me, 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 me. She just isn't just being selfish. She's also withdrawing all the empathy toward men. You see, that's one of the deepest crimes committed by feminism, is that it withdraws empathy and understanding from men. What worse thing can one faction of humanity do to another than to cut them off from understanding and compassion? So, yeah, I mean,
But that's one of the things I'm saying. I don't think it's accidental, and I don't think it's just them leveraging their power, for their progress. I think it's them leveraging their power to the detriment of the other group. Because they don't even just say, we are the victim. They specifically go out of their way to make sure no one else is the victim. They make sure they're the only victim. And anyone else who tries to say that they're also being oppressed, they just try and shut them up. Kind of suspicious.
This is. Sorry, I was just going to say, that's exactly why they latched onto the gay rights and black rights and all that sort of stuff. It's not because they want to help them, it's because they want to put all these people in front of a camera, give them a I need feminism because placard, and take a picture of them.
yeah,
It's the same join or die mentality that every group ever has used.
yeah.
Men's rights activists are never going to join, and so they just attack us. But of course they go after every group and tell them, hey, pretend like you're our friends. It's ridiculous. And I feel bad saying this because one thing Dark pointed out was that it's not necessarily all feminists. It's the doctrine of feminism that's the problem, because some of them don't necessarily believe the nonsense that the doctrine would imply. So it's not all of them, but the doctrine itself is definitely a problem, and the organizations at the head of it that spread said doctrines are definitely a problem.
I mean, another issue too, though, is you took you quoted what I said. So, I think on top of the doctrine, I think this whole issue of it represents everybody, and whether they like to admit or not, they're never going to be able to represent everybody. And that's something they're not willing to accept. They want to keep pushing that, but they really can't. Even, the doctrine causes toxic feminism, which obviously is one of our biggest issues that we fight against, because that causes so many problems when it comes to the policies they create and things they pass. But the general notion, as well as equality for everybody, is a notion we can all agree on, but the way of which they go about it, they have to come to an understanding, is not entirely possible. You can't just have one group which represents everybody, because to be frankly honest, they never can, because they haven't experienced all of it, and they never will. They have to come to an acceptance of where you allow other groups to exist, which then represent the issues of those other groups, because you will understand those issues, and then you all work together to
Yeah,
the
but
general.
the thing is,
Go ahead.
they
Mark.
don't actually want to represent us. What they want to do is say, okay, we represent male issues as well, and then do nothing about it. It's kind of like, it's a trick. I mean, this is why I don't think that they have so much a doctrine as they have a tribalistic position, and they'll say absolutely anything they can in the moment that supports it. This is why they're not consistent at all. This is why they adopt two equal and opposite positions depending on the issue, who they're talking to, and the sentence they're in. It's like one moment they're gender constructivists, where they're like, oh yeah, gender is just programmed into us by society. And in the other moment, they're like, sexuality isn't a choice, gender isn't a choice. I'm a woman. Women have it the worst. I mean, most of that's implied, but it's like women have it the worst, but there's no such thing as women. That's their position. So they just want as much power and privilege as they can get, and they'll say anything they can to do it. They're Amber Herds. That's basically what they are. They're Amber Herds, and they'll say anything they can in the moment to get what they want. And this is why they're not consistent at all. And if you actually listen to them and try to hash out what they're saying logically, it doesn't work. And they know it, because they're not intending to be honest. They're just grifters, and they're just trying to get one over on everyone. And the only reason it works is because we have this overwhelming empathy for women that blocks out reason. That's why, like, men will, even if they know the woman is wrong, they'll side with the woman.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying. Like, they're not trying to represent anyone. They're trying to pretend like they can represent other people so that they can control them. It's not an actual effort to represent other people. I think this is one of the reasons that some people compared them, to like Nazis. It's not because they committed atrocious acts or anything like that, like the Nazis did. It's because the Nazis had this idea of, we're going to create, a new world with our organization, but like every other organization has to die first. They didn't tell you that, but That's the idea, right?
And trust me,
And
some of them absolutely would tally up a body count as high as the Nazis. I think the very worst of the worst, the ones who casually tweet about killing men, the ones who go out of their way to lie about the damage circumcision does, about the mortality of prostate cancer, the ones who fight against homeless shelters for men, the ones who fight against legally recognizing domestic violence for men. Imagine if they were dictators of the world, they would easily rack up 50 million bodies. Easily.
I don't
One
think
way or
we
another,
can
either
refer
and
to
not
them.
either through even like if you intentionally skew statistics on domestic violence, or if you intentionally put obstacles for homeless men getting shelter or housing and so they freeze to death, is that directly killing them? Maybe not, but you're killing them through negligence. Would men die in a feminist dictatorship? Absolutely. 100%, no question about it. They're dying right
It
now
would
because
be
of
the
feminist
majority
inspired
of guys.
policies.
Yeah. Oh,
Men and
sorry,
boys
I
are
keep
dying.
interrupting you. Sorry, kept interrupting you. I just wanted to say that, yeah, absolutely, they wouldn't even have to um, be dictators. All they have to be is put in charge of these social structures where they can quietly reframe narratives and rejig laws so that the people who end up getting the short stick are always men. And they have killed people. They have probably killed millions of people just through this boneheaded, bloody-minded tribalism that they've got to have everything for women and nothing for men. It's like you'll probably balk at them me saying they've killed millions, but just think about it. They control the domestic violence and sexual assault and rape, uh, guidelines for every country outside of probably just the Middle East. And even in the Middle East, like they actually do have some sway because you know that it's the appeal to female victimhood. It's just wired into us. Sorry, what's that, Noah? Noah, you there? I think you're something's talking in the back of your mic. You should probably turn your mic off when you're not talking. Yeah, but yeah, it's they've been doing this for like 50 years now, and they've not just men either. They've killed women, they've killed children. I mean, you aren't allowed to take a 12-year-old boy into a domestic violence shelter because he's male. And that means the mother, if she loves the boy, is going to stay at home with the boy and, put up with their violent partner. And that could ultimately end up with them being killed. Uh, it also causes violent women to be given free rein, so they get to kill their partners and then they get framed into self defense. It means that homeless men are just ignored and homeless women are given special shelters. It means that, like, circumcision is like they are one of the groups of people who are getting in the way every time we try and get circumcision banned. They're quite happy to ban FGM, and they're actually shooting themselves in the foot, to be honest, because the thing they call FGM is actually only 1% of female genital cutting. So what's going to happen is, and it's already happening now, universities are making the argument that in the name of equality, we should be able to circumcise girls as well as boys. And this could potentially be the thing that helps us get circumcision banned, actually, because if we can ride the outrage, we can get it all banned. And we can show the inconsistency because the female lobby absolutely doesn't want this, even if it's basically, they've allowed it. But yeah, this is all over the world. Everything is it's just run by this ideology that's sees men as disposable.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think that that concept is one of the reasons why people compare them to Nazis, you know? It's not that they were doing like the same stuff, although, you know, you made some good points as to they probably could and maybe already have, but I think it's also this idea of the expendability of the people outside of their group. I think that concept is one of the big things that, you know, justifies that comparison. And, you know, I think that, you know, what Tim was talking about as far as like, you know, just focusing on equality, I think that that's a true movement for everyone because it doesn't actually focus on any particular label. It just focuses on treating everyone fairly. And that can come to include animal rights, child rights, that can include everyone.
Mhm.
And you know, having subdivisions within that is fine, but I think having, you know, one movement that focuses just on treating people fairly, I think that's far more important than clinging to this movement that's shown that it doesn't really care about anyone other than women.
Yeah. Well, I'd say a couple of things. All right, so feminism is evil. Okay, so what? The banality of evil. You know, there's been plenty of men and men's organizations been evil. What's the big shock? So it's just that this is women acting out of their shadow. So okay, you know, let's just deal with it, and also let's not just describe ourselves as just having been disposable. That's uh, that's only part of the story, you know. I mean, consider oh, you know, Plato and Caesar and Jesus and Leonardo and Shakespeare and Bach and Einstein. You know, it's not just been one big victimization for men. Okay, men have gotten their good stuff out of the deal, suffered the constant, you know, enjoyed the benefits and suffered the liabilities, just like women have. And it's really important that we not succumb to this idea that we're all washed up. That respect now is something, you know. Sure, feminism and its immense powers done everything it can to diminish respect for men, but we have to believe that respect for men is archetypal, just as love for women is. That there's a you know, biological instinctual basis for it. We need to believe that because we need to do what men are good at. We need to step up as leaders. You know, gender politics is broken. Let's fix it. That's what men are good at. If men would just lead wisely, you know, we could we could fix this thing. If we lead with our victimization, if we give the impression that we're trying to oust women from victimhood center seats just so man can sit there instead, the general public will not jump on board with us. You know, if we present that we just want to escalate the battle of the sexes, the general public will not be on board with us. We need to present as a positive movement that is looking to, you know, repair things, make things better, um, uh, fix the marriage contract, for example, to you know, stimulate, uh, and it all balances out kind of outlook on gender reality, some more positive that de-escalates the battle of the sexes. You know, oh,
So
feminism disaster all around. I mean, one of these things that the men's rights movement just doesn't grasp is that feminism has been dreadful toward women. It is an absolute emotional poison for women. It inculcates in women this idea that they are the powerless victims, which is just emotionally self-fulfilling. It's drowning women in sympathy. It's telling women that all fault is male, which instills a poisonous self-righteousness. It's telling women that their legacy is nothing but property and chattel, which is incredibly false. It tells women that their biology only betrays them, which limits women's prioritizing of family, marriage, parenting. It limits women's immersion within roles and realms in which many women are at their happiest. It's a dreadful thing all around. But that there's an opportunity in that because it's just a poisonous thing. It's an opportunity for us to present something better. And
So what I'm hearing mainly is less accusative, more constructive.
yes,
And also use the system against itself. So this is something I've been doing for a while, but I want to like tell people about this because I don't think everyone knows. What you can do is you like cause a feedback loop by saying things like feminism hurts women, like Tim was saying. Like
yes,
if you frame it like that, feminism hurts women, it hurts them so badly.
terrible,
Like
terrible.
yeah, people like you can trigger the tears almost straight away. It's like,
Yes,
look, it's telling you all these horrible things that just aren't true, and it's trying to hurt you. Like
yeah. I
you're
mean,
in
consider
an abusive relationship with feminism.
which world has feminism attacked? It hasn't been the world of men. It's attacked the world of women. It has disparaged and diminished the traditional world of women, of home, family, parenting, love, social fabric. This is what. Um uh, yeah, I mean, right. I mean, it's really important to bear in mind that this feminism had a toxic effect on both sexes. So when we go to seek to um, confront it and render it a toothless anachronism, we do so from the basis that it is toxic to both sexes, because that's true.
The issue is that feminism is, to be completely honest, based the idea that equality for all started was a good idea. The problem is it's overtaken by the fact that feminism seems to be very focused on the past. And I don't disagree there are women's issues or racial issues or LGBT issues, but I've noticed that within the mainstream feminist movement that we see, which honestly has turned quite toxic, and then some of these other movements we're seeing, some of the Black rights movement, some of the LGBT movement, there are obviously good sides to all of them, but a lot of their propaganda is surrounded by this idea of reparations of the past as well. That's really a big issue because they're so hyper focused on the past that they've sort of in a way just completely forgotten about the present. And because of that, they use that hyper focus on the past to really build sort of this attitude, this grudge that is becoming toxic to everybody. If you were to argue, I was arguing with some feminists, and they were talking about female genital mutilation, and not a single one of them could say anything about the status of current female genital mutilation. But they could tell you about female genital mutilation about a decade and a half ago and complain about it and talk about how they haven't really kept tabs on changes. They're just repeating this endless cycle. You see it with the way they teach women's history. It's this never ending, extremely generalized history that completely takes out any male supporters of the time. It takes out men at all. It paints women as this full-on victim. It doesn't paint any kind of progression. It makes it sound like it was just a sudden kind of move for voting rights instead of a progression that was going on. They're so focused on the idea of getting some kind of, I don't want to say revenge, but some kind of, maybe like a statement or a prize or something back for stuff in the past, that they aren't actually focusing on any kind of change for the future or the present or for the better.
I think one of the reasons
I
why
don't
too
think
is
they've ever.
because they're not really interested in actually making any progress. Again, they're looking for tools to use to get what they want. So it's not about them trying to actually keep tabs on things and make progress as far as women's issues. They just want to find things to blame, and to say, oh, we're a victim. And once they have those things, that's all they need. And so they're just teaching them what tools to use, and what buzzwords to call other people. And, I think part of the problem is that, like Tim was saying, men kind of played into it, although I don't necessarily entirely agree with how. I think one of the worst ways we played into it was responding emotionally to it, because that's the point, right? It's supposed to anger you, and it's supposed to make you defensive. And at the end of the day, the way that you acknowledge a terrible argument isn't by facing it, it's by circumventing it, because it's not worth entertaining. So I think, like Tim was saying, the way to really get around this and to beat this, to be honest, just terrible logic, is just to be more constructive and to focus on actually building past this. Because another thing Tim said that was interesting was that this didn't really affect men all that much. While feminism has attacked fatherhood and husbands and men, for the most part, we've retained a lot of what defines us. We still define the workplace, we still define leadership, in politics and in a lot of other spaces. And we still demand respect in society. And I think that leveraging that respect to really help, push societal progress, I think that's going to be really beneficial.
Mhm.
Yeah, that might be a good note to take us out on, in fact. Uh, Dark, would you be willing to take us into free talk mode?
Sure. So this has been the Men's Human Rights Discord chat. We're here now every week on Saturday, which is at 9 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. UK. We always love having you guys here. We love hearing what you have to say. This was an amazing conversation. Hopefully we'll hear more on this. And hopefully we will see you all next week. Remember, if you ever have topics to recommend, you can contact Men Are Human, Blue Orange, or myself.